Hello everybody, Marcos Villegas here with Kathy Duva, who just did a press tour, like a mini press tour, right? With like 7, 8, 9, 10 media members. Obviously, various topics that they were talking to you about, but the one that I think has come up the most often is the status of the rematch between your fighter, Sergey Kovalev, and Andre Ward. Me looking at the news sites, I saw a little quote that I just wanted to get your take on. Andre Ward saying that he might retire. He's thinking, like, I don't know if I could. I should keep going. I've accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. What do you make to that news? And then after that, give us an update on everything.
Well, I guess if Sergey Kovalev had beaten me up the way he beat up Ward a few weeks ago, I'd feel the same way. But look, anybody can retire if they want. That's his choice. But if he wants to fight, he'll be fighting Sergey Kovalev next.
On that issue, he also came out, the team said, hey, the rematch is going to be in a whole lot different terms. What does that mean in the general context of everything? I know obviously he won the fight. He now becomes the A side, but is anything else different? Does that mean it's just a bunch of other stipulations that are going to be on there? How do you take to all that, since you know all that stuff more intimately?
Look, the terms of the rematch were negotiated when Ward was given the opportunity to fight for 3 titles. You make concessions to get that opportunity. So all the terms of the rematch were between Main Events and Rock Nation were negotiated at that time. Whatever negotiation he has to go through with his promoter, that's between him and them. So I only can assume that's what he's talking about.
So in terms of the rematch, are talks been going on? Are they ongoing? Or is it something where you're giving Sergey his time off right now and then at a later date you'll go ahead and pick that up?
Well, we have notified Rock Nation that we are picking up our option for the rematch, and I'm told that they've had conversations with HBO about specific dates and whatnot. I'm sure, and that they've been busy putting together a fight that they're doing in February. So I have to assume we will be hearing. I've been told I'll be hearing from them shortly.
In terms of that, is there a certain date you guys are targeting, or would you like for Kovalev to fight around a certain time?
Well, from my talks with HBO, my understanding was that June was the target. But then today I read something where Bob Arum said that he was putting Manny Pacquiao in June. Okay. So that would free up April, and April's fine with us.
Now, with the pay-per-view buys, you guys did like 160,000 buys, somewhere around that number. I've told people that that's not to me, I don't think that's bad, because everybody has to start somewhere. And when you look at historically, there's some guys that have become huge pay-per-view draws that had around that number. You guys did better than the Golovkin pay-per-view with Lemieux. There you go. So what's your take on that when people say, oh, only 150? Like, I don't know.
Well, look, first of all, that number is a preliminary number, and all indications are it's going to go up somewhat. So yeah. I will remain an optimist about that. I think that we went into this hoping to do 200,000 buys. We ran into a lot of. Remember, we planned this fight over a year ago. We ran into a lot of headwinds we didn't anticipate when we started planning this. We ran into a period in which there was no boxing on any network television, HBO or otherwise, in the months leading up, which means that readership on websites and everything else was way down. We ran into a Pacquiao fight 2 weeks before ours on pay-per-view, which I had to think would have. I said at the time that we heard it was made, that's going to knock out our numbers down by 20%. At this point, that's exactly what it knocked it down. And again, I think we actually did a little better than that. The NFL is down by 27% right now. Is that the effect of the election, of the whole world's worrying about Armageddon, whatever it is? There are a lot of Hispanic fans of boxing worrying about, whether or not, they're not worried about buying a pay-per-view right now, right? And nor should they be. So there were a lot of headwinds here, and taking all that into account, our site doubled what we had expected. So we made up for some of that shortfall with that. From Main Event's perspective, it was a very successful event. And I know there were people who were walking around going, oh, you're going to do 1 million buys. And I kept trying to temper expectations, because first pay-per-view, Manny Pacquiao, about 150. First pay-per-view for Floyd Mayweather. He fought Arturo Gatti, who was a legend for Gatti's title, did about a little under 400. Mayweather at that point had fought on HBO 9 times, was very well known, had been in the Olympics, had a much higher profile than Sergey Kovalev certainly did. Perhaps equal to Ward's, but Ward, remember, fought most of his career on Showtime, not on HBO. He only had a few fights on HBO. And you look at the numbers that Showtime does, and you look at the numbers HBO does, and they're still pretty much the same differential there was back then. You look at some of those Super 6 fights, and they didn't do big numbers. So Ward was not this huge star known to the casual fan. And Sergey, 4 years ago, nobody knew who he was anywhere, Russia or here. So it was a big leap we took with this, and it was a risky one. But we came away, in the end, when I do all the accounting, we made more than we would have if we'd done it on HBO. And if you take all of the differentials into account, if we'd done the same site, figure all that out, we ended up for main events at a higher number, so we didn't make the wrong decision. We started building something, and we think it's a platform that he's going to be on for years, and I think his profile certainly has risen as a result of the fight, and in a very perverted way, the outcome probably did it more. So
yeah, I was going to mention that even though it wasn't the outcome that your team wanted or was expecting, given how the fight played out, I think it generated much more tension, much more buzz for a rematch. In terms of that, I'm sure you must have gotten tons of phone calls or text messaging like, hey, we saw the fight this way. Talk to me about I guess, the few days after the fight in terms of that, because talking with people, the consensus is it was a close fight, but they feel because of the knockdown, it edged Kovalev over in points for a lot of people's scorecards.
Look, there were some close rounds in that fight. Sergey did not get a single one of them. I don't think that's ever happened. The champion did not get a single close round. I think there were also rounds that were close that he didn't get. So people say, well, you shouldn't complain about a one-point fight, and I never do. Unless it's not really a one-point fight, and I don't think this was really a one-point fight. So whatever, we have to move on and put it past us, and Sergey is taken this extraordinarily well. He is just determined. Well, now I'm even more determined to find a way to, to improve, to do better. I learned a lot. I know what to do. I believe at the end of that fight, Sergey was the one who was coming on. And as I said to someone earlier, if there had been a 15-round fight, I think he would have won it. So he's only going to get 12 rounds next time, but he's going to start, as both of them will start at, at a place where they've both seen a lot of what the other can do. But I think Sergey's quite confident, and he kind of walked away even when the fight ended, and we were up there talking right before the press conference started. He said, boy, I learned a lot tonight. I learned a lot tonight. Now I know. So.
Who's the most famous person that texted you about the fight? I'm just curious. This is just like popping in my head.
Famous? I don't really have a lot of famous friends. Yeah, you do. No, I don't. No, not that.
Or one that sticks out, like a message that you got that like really stuck out and said, you know what, this encompasses everything that.
What stuck out, I was getting messages from all over the world. I got them from New Zealand and from South Africa and from all parts of Eastern Europe, and that's the thing that really struck me. It's like it was the whole world that was shocked by this. It wasn't it wasn't just here. It started to strike me like how many of Germany, another one came out, how many friends they have in so many different places, and they all watched this and had exactly the same reaction. They were outraged, and there were people that I hadn't heard from in years who were sending me messages saying like, my God, that was awful. Your guy got robbed. That was awful. It softens the blow a little bit, to know that like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is not just something I saw, but I also saw a lot of commentary from people who were pulling for Ward, sending me messages and talking online and talking in interviews saying, oh, well, Ward's my guy, but he didn't win. And that reminded me of the Whitaker-Chavez fight, where the thing that made it so clear, that made it so much more.
It's interesting you say that, because when that happened, I kind of thought like, man, just when it comes to the big fights, like you just can't get a break sometimes.
Why is that? I spent weeks trying to figure out what it is, and the thing is, when you look, Whitaker-Chavez is a whole other story. I know what it was. That was probably not something I should address. It still stings. That one hurts. Isn't it funny that we had them together the night before the fight? Yeah. I think part of what happened was the crowd, and in Whitaker-Chavez, I think the crowd does affect judges. And
you notice shots more.
You do,
even though they may not be more effective. Yeah.
The crowd actually amplifies it, and that's something I really have to applaud the WBC for their using the noise-canceling headphones. I think that's a really good idea, because Whitaker-Chavez was in the Alamo Dome, and in both fights in the beginning, the crowd was silent, absolutely silent, and then the guy who everybody thought was going to win starts coming on again. And then the crowd gets in love with this idea of this comeback. I get it. It's a very emotional. It's wonderful. But in both of those fights, the guy who should have gotten the decision finished stronger, figured him out, whatever. The thing about Whitaker Chavez was, again, the fans. And we were in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, and walking out of the arena, and we had Whitaker. I mean, they didn't know who we were, but they had Whitaker jackets on. And they were like, "Man, your guy got robbed. Man, your guy." We walked into Tierra after the fight with my father-in-law, who was very famous, and walked into the restaurant, and they stood up and applauded. We got a standing ovation. Wow. Everybody, man, your guy got robbed. Man, your guy got robbed. And this was, in that respect, kind of similar. We get that, and it's like, I really rather have my guy win, but it happens. This is boxing, it, and that's why Sergey knows he's going to have to find a way to knock him out next time.
All right. Well, we hope it's either in June or in April, like you mentioned, Kathy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Here with Kathy Duva, of course, of Main Events, Marcos Vegas, here in Los Angeles.